Greetings and welcome. My name is Jake Rayson. I am a forest gardener and forest garden designer, and this is a free preview of my online course, Create a Backyard Forest. This is part of my lockdown forest garden lockdown live stream series to kind of give something back to the forest gardening community, the burgeoning forest gardening community. A couple of things. This is the 7th in 8 lectures. Today it's all about ground preparation. It's all about clearing the grass and the land to be able to plant your shrubs and your ground cover, and also covers paths as well, the kind of important different types of path and the importance of paths. So it's a relatively short lecture, you'll be glad to hear. The course notes are always available. The latest version will always be available here, forestgarden.wales/course/prep. If you press P, you bring up the notes. As you can see, I haven't done many notes for this. I will be adding them when I do the full course. But for now, that's where the notes will be. So extra links and things will be in there. And let's get cracking then. So I have actually divided up the course into three basic kind of sections. So the first 3 are the kind of theoretical, the planning and the designing. So getting out in the garden but not actually doing anything, seeing what's about, putting together ideas, and yeah, getting ready, getting prepared. So that's the kind of prepared section. The second section is what I like to think of as a structural side. So that's windbreaks and outdoor structures like polytunnels and greenhouses, and thinking about paths, starting the production with perennial vegetables close to the house, and then putting in the canopy layer, the canopy tree layer, and that's what I call structural. So you can pause between these different sections. You don't have to rush ahead and get everything done all at the same time. And then the final section is this one here. This is kind of, I say, finishing off the forest garden. It's finishing off the first stages of the forest garden. So the ground preparation is clearing the ground and putting shrubs in and planting out ground cover, and also looking at the paths here. And then the final lecture will be shrubs and ground cover. Yes, which is pretty much what it says. Okay, so today, looking at paths, importance of paths for access and for attention, the importance of timing, and this is kind of hard to put across really. One of the things I've really noticed is I would have been so much better to have started close to the house and then worked out bits. So get the windbreaks in, get the canopy layer in, leave everything because it's there's an acre site, the first forest garden. Windbreaks, canopy layer, and then use grass. Leave the grass as it is. Put single paths, mown grass paths, and only then prepare the ground section by section, slowly moving out from the house, and then just cutting the grass back once a year, and keeping the brambles back from the hedges. And that's how I would rather do it. You see from the picture here, I sheet mulched everything, but what this does mean, it's a lot of work all at the same time, so you need to be prepared for it, and I haven't really been that prepared for it. You need thousands upon thousands of ground cover plants. So timing, yeah, take your time really. There we go. And then looking at methods of mulching, and the mulching is mulching in terms of clearing. I'll be talking about grass. It depends upon your situation. Quite a lot of people with a lot more land. A lot of people are using have pasture or rough pasture, like an old field grass with grass in it, and that's what I'll be talking about. Obviously, this depends. Different people have different situations. They'll have much smaller gardens, in which case this won't really apply, or they'll have a woodland, which case you'll actually be doing more felling and clearing and removing roots and the like. So what I'll be talking about really is kind of the methods for clearing grass. So paths. Now paths really are important, and I have come to the the kind of realization that they're important not so much for the plants but for the people, because it helps you get a grip on the land, and by dividing things up and defining areas, you get a much better handle on different parts of the land, and it just helps people kind of come to terms with it. It helps me come to terms with it. So you leave areas, as I was saying before, you can leave areas that you're working on. You can work on them later, and you don't have to do. You can take time to concentrate on one area at a time, and paths an ideal way of kind of dividing up the land to make it more manageable. Yeah. So it's not about what grows there; it's about how it makes it easier for people to approach the transformation of the land. And kind of first and foremost, it sounds silly, but really it's about access and attention. This is a wood chip mulch path, a wood chip path leading to a compost bay with there's a gooseberry and a comfrey here and some carrots on the left hand side. But it's really, if you've got a path into an area, then that makes it easier to go into that area. That sounds really, really obvious, but it is really, really important. I've got an area which we've called the blue bean border, because we've got a blue bean tree, the Decasnia fargesii, I think it is, the big blue bean sausage tree, and it's it's a fair old size. It's about 25 meters square, I think. But I didn't put any paths into it, and there's like blackcurrant bushes. There's all real higgledy-piggledy planting, to be honest. I'm going to I'm going to change the area into more soft fruits. I'll be putting red currants, white currants, black currants, gooseberries, and then moving the vegetables, more vegetable-y stuff elsewhere. But the kind of issue is I didn't put paths in at the beginning. Yesterday I dug out 5 brambles, about 2-3 foot long, self-seeded brambles, out of there, and it's because there weren't paths in there. I haven't been accessing it. I haven't really been paying attention to it. So if you have paths, if you have a route, then it makes the attention, it focuses the attention. And the other side of this as well is to make the distance of the beds, make them manageable so that you can reach in, and that you don't have just like a massive great big bed and you've got to wade through and it's like, oh no, the brambles coming in. If you make the beds smaller, then they will be far more manageable. So this is a small forest garden that I designed for a client in Northamptonshire, I think. Really, really simple, central focal point of, I think it's a cherry tree. But the whole, if you look, the whole thing is that the beds are small enough that you can reach across, that you can get access to it. I think for a larger forest garden, what you're actually looking at doing are the akin to the keyhole paths. I think I did a drawing of this last week. So yeah, so you have a bed, and you have a path goes into a bed with a little space in the middle, and that's just enough to be able to access quite a wide area. But it is important to be able to do that. And then we need to look at how you make your paths. Now, grass is brilliant because grass grows and grass will dominate and grass is tough. But these are all the reasons why grass is a pain in the ass, because it just takes over. What I would say, speaking from experience, it's good because if you've got a large forest garden, then you really need to have. You can't hard pave the whole bloody lot or have wood chip paths, because you spend your whole time maintaining the paths. Where the nice thing about grass path is that you can run a lawnmower over it, and it's done. It's using the maintenance is much easier. What I would say is to reduce the width of your grass paths as much as you can. Really, you've got to be careful that you've got plants coming in. You don't want to make it so that you have plants coming in onto the path, and they get wet, and then you won't go up there because it's soaking wet. So you need enough space, but make them the minimum width that you can for your grass paths, because that will save you hours and hours of mowing. So yeah, really do that. So in the example here, this is up by a fruit bed. And there's a young cornice hedge here, and what I'm going to do, I'm doing this piece by piece, is reducing the width of the grass paths. So I will mulch underneath the cornice on this side, so mulch all the way down there, and then I will remove the deturf on this side by this bed here. Yeah, just to reduce the amount of mowing, and then I'll have like a single, it's not a major route, and I'll have a single grass path going up here, which I'll mow once every few weeks, every 3 weeks, depends how fast the grass is growing. So yes, make the minimum you can. Another very good tip I heard the other day was that to make it quicker as well, you can have, if for a main path, you can have a single track that you do every week, just whiz the lawnmower around, and then have one width on one side and one width on the other, and then do them every few weeks. So you'll get much, it'll be harder to mow them, but then you get you get a bit of growth on the side, and then do that. Now, what I would say about grass, which I haven't put here, that it's a really good idea to edge them. There is a term that I've made up, which is brilliant. It's called grass creep, and grass creep is where the grass creeps into your borders. And as we don't use lawn edges in for cutting, making nice, clean, tidy edges in the forest garden, it's actually handy to have some logs. I've just been experimenting. Somebody on the Love Food Forests Facebook group mentioned this, but using edging. So whether that's logs or stones, but just to kind of help create areas. But it's also really good to stop the grass from just going straight into an area. So the plan here, I just recently mulched this, is for this ground ivy to extend down here, and there'll be a U shape to access the compost bays. And I've used logs of varying sizes, whatever I have to hand. And I'm going to see how it goes with the lawnmower. The idea is that every now and again you can hoik the logs out of the way and pull the grass up. Otherwise, the grass will just kind of keep on growing. So wood chip paths are great. So what my plan for wood chip paths is for specific high volume areas. So like around the compost bays and on the annual raised beds, that are becoming more perennial raised beds, the idea is for these to be wood chip paths. So stuff will seed in them and they will slowly turn into soil. But the idea being that you can just top it up every couple of years. You can top up the wood chip and just kind of keep everything in hand. And then everything else will be grass. The front of the house is slightly different. It's much more ornamental, and we've got some gravel. So we'll have there's weed membrane underneath the gravel. It's brick underneath, old brick, and then gravel, weed membrane, then gravel, and then kept in by bits of wood and sleepers and stuff. But the hard surfaces, they really will be they're very, very, very specific areas of the garden. And designed to be like much less maintenance than the other areas. The thing to bear in mind about paths is that no matter what path you have, there will always be maintenance, because what happens is you'll get a dandelion or a broadleaf plantain growing in the path, and it will bring up nutrients and it will die back, and then that will decompose, and then that will add soil, and that's a growing medium between the gravel or between the wood chip. So there will always be a movement for nature to colonize. Stuff just keeps on growing no matter where it is, and it's kind of just there will always be maintenance no matter what path you've got. There will always be maintenance. So I'm not like a big hard surface path sort of person, but it is there are lots of different kind of techniques. I think the main thing is like if it's somewhere you're definitely going to have, you put hardcore. I'm not sure about this, but you put hardcore down for about 30 centimeters, and then you put your whatever it is you're putting on top, whether it's brick or whether it's pebbles or what have you, gravel. You put that on the top, and that's to stop the weeds from getting established in the path itself. Okay, so timing. On to timing. What I would say is clearing sections. As I kind of mentioned this earlier on, Get the structural planting in. Get the structural planting in. Get your windbreaks in and your canopy layer, and only then, section by section, clear each section in preparation for the shrubs and the ground cover, because you need an awful lot of plants. Now, you really need to be propagating plants from the beginning. It helps so much to propagate plants from the beginning. I will include a propagation section in the earlier on, actually. You need about 3 to 5 ground cover plants per square meter. So for 10 meters by 10 meter space, that's 400 plants ish. So yeah, get propagating. This is my propagation bed. I've got the propagation area, some dwarf comfrey, some phytomybericum. But get propagating at the beginning. Doesn't have to be fancy old raised bed. It can be like an area that you have access to and that can be watered. But get propagating at the beginning. Doesn't matter if you make too many. You can't really grow too many plants. But yeah, you don't have, the thing about doing it section by section is that it's much easier to plan. I've kind of calculated, there's the ornamental forest garden, which I'll show you a picture of in a second. I can't remember actually. It's about 3,000 plants I need to grow for it, and that's a lot of plants. That's an awful lot of plants. So I will be doing it section by section when I clear it. So yeah, this is the beginnings of the nursery, which was what's happened to that particular area. That's supposed to be a woodland garden, so it's now actually turned into a propagation area for the other parts of the forest garden. And as I was saying, embrace the grass and make the most of the grass. Use grass as a ground cover. Much better to have grass than it is to have plastic sheet mulch for a couple of years. So what we've done, this is the ornamental forest garden, mown grass path, and then just let the grass grow. And to be honest, I'm just checking. I'm clearing out bits of dock and clearing out bramble, dock, the odd thistle. You know, if it's just to keep them down a bit, really. But that will be the preferred way of doing it. And then I'll clear one section on one side, plant that up, and then later on that season or next season, in the autumn, do another section. So just do it bit by bit. Take your time with it. And then finally, the final third section is mulch. Different types of mulch we've got, which one to choose, and then we look at the 3 different ones: cardboard, sheet mulch, and deturfing. So this just to emphasize, this is about mulching to clear the ground. In forest gardening, you always have a permanent ground cover. The ultimate aim is to have a permanent ground cover that isn't grass. That doesn't require much maintenance apart from the occasional bit of weeding. So mulching to clear the ground, then we plant the shrubs, then we put a bark mulch on, and then finally you put in a temporary ground cover like white mustard, and then you plant out your ground cover plants, and then your forest garden is finished. So the mulch types we've got: cardboard mulch. We're actually using this at the moment, actually in the cottage garden. Putting down old boxes. Plastic woven sheet mulch, which can good for covering larger areas and last longer. And then deturfing, so manually with a spade, with a turf cutter or digger. Which one you choose really depends upon the size of your garden. So if you've got a small garden, you could manually deturf, it depends upon the size really. So small, use cardboard or deturf manually with a spade and a lawn cutter. They're like a lawn edger. The shaped. Should have a picture of it. It has a blade and like a half moon shape, and then you can slice the turf up, and it makes it easier to then take a sharp shovel and then cut the turf off. Medium size garden, cardboard, possibly use the turf cutter, which is a machine, or use a plastic sheet mulch. And then a large garden, use a I would say sheet mulch or deturf with a digger. So cardboard, the advantages disadvantage, it decomposes in a few months, so you need to have everything ready. So this is, it's the nature of cardboard that as soon as it's kind of killed off the grass, you need to be ready to go straight in. It's not something you can just leave, which in some ways is a good thing. It's a kind of cheaper way of doing it, and it's good for smaller areas. Make sure to remove the plastic, so make sure to remove the tape and any labels and stuff. And a good thing to do is to get the boxes from bicycle shops, because they cover a large area. They'll be free, and if you can, use double thickness rather than a single layer of cardboard. Use a kind of double thickness, because that will just provide more sheet mulching. And as with sheet mulch and cardboard mulch, make sure to weigh it down, because it will blow away if you don't. Weigh it down with heavy objects. Sheet mulch is kind of good in some respects, but it lasts. But it's plastic, and I kind of have had enough of. I've had enough of plastic. I want to move away from using it. Really, it's kind of handy because it lasts for ages, but it will leave in the forest garden. I'm just finding bits like threads of plastic sheet mulch still to this day. But if you're going to use it, then make sure that you buy quality sheet mulch so that you can reuse it. Don't get some cheap old tat like what I did from eBay. Get quality stuff, and then you might be able to reuse it in sections. So Formium is a really good brand. And when you do use it, don't try to put plants in between. Try to reduce the amount of time that you're cutting a hole and putting a plant in. If you can, if you've got a hedge, for example, put two bits of sheet mulch together and plant the hedge in the middle. That makes it easier to reuse the sheet mulch. Use metal pegs rather than plastic pegs, because if they get lost, they will eventually rust and disappear. I've used plastic pegs. And again, weigh it down. It will blow away. There's nothing worse. You think, oh, it's a nice calm day. Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. This is enough weight on it. It won't be. Weigh it down and weigh it down some more, because there's nothing worse than going out into a howling gale and picking up half an acre of plastic sheet mulch which has wrapped itself all the way around your trees. And I know I've done it. And then the final method of mulching is deturfing, and this is my kind of more preferred method, really. Now I'll change the picture on this as well. So deturfing manually, what I would suggest in any of these methods of deturfing is to get rid of deep-rooted perennial plants that you don't want, particularly like dock. Because if you just take off the turf, dock in particular will just grow back. Well, and dandelion, and so try to get rid of the deep-rooted perennial plants first as well. So deturfing manually, it's a great workout. Another tip from personal experience is do not use your knee as a lever for the shovel when you're trying to get the turf up, because what will happen is you will really hurt your knee, and then you'll have a dodgy knee for the rest of your life. So don't use your knee as a lever. Just get it in there and use your arms and bend from your legs. The other thing to do, that's good for small areas. The other thing is to use a turf cutter. Now, I actually haven't used a turf cutter. I've seen people have used it. You can hire them, crikey, from Juicens and different hire companies. I'm not terribly sure. I think the grass has to be fairly neat and tidy without too many bumps for them to work, and they kind of put blades slightly underneath the soil, and they'll cut through, and then you get a nice roll of turf. But they kind of only work with nice level turf, I think. I am actually going to try one out later on this year. Hopefully I'm going to get a job creating a forest garden when I'll be using a turf cutter, so I will report back. And finally is a mini digger. Now, this is kind of interesting for a larger area. This is Eros, he's a great chap, really good digger driver, using a mini digger, and he is making a pond. And I kind of noticed when he was doing it, he was scraping up all the grass and the turf, and putting it into a mound and distributing it elsewhere. And I just thought, well, that's actually a good way of clearing grass. And I asked him if he could do. It's a 1 acre site, and there's probably half an acre of beds to de-turf, and he said that would take him a day. So now my plan is possibly to do it in 2 halves because of the number of ground cover plants that would be required and the amount of bark. Possibly do it in 2 halves, and then create with the turf, create some temporary mounds along the path for some kind of miniature windbreaks in the garden itself. So just to kind of, in the lecture on windbreaks, we're talking about how you can have big windbreaks which cover the whole garden, or if you're on a slope like we are in an exposed position, it helps sometimes to have repeat a windbreak and have a smaller windbreak midway to help protect the rest of the garden. So I'll be doing that. I think I'm going to be creating miniature windbreaks along the way. The disadvantage is it's not plastic as well. I know it is using diesel, but I think is in some respects much better to do. Disadvantage is that there's a lot of nutrients which are being kind of scraped away, so they're not being put back into the garden. So you're kind of impoverishing the soil. But, on balance, I think I'd rather do that than have half an acre of plastic sheet mulch, which is what I did in the original forest garden. So there we go. Backyard forest takeaways. This is the first time that I'm going to be finishing before 10:40, which is quite incredible. Choose the type of mulch, the mulch type that you've got according to your situation. Reduce your footprint. What on earth does that mean? That means... oh yes, your ecological footprint. So just choose a method which is the most ecologically friendly. So cardboard if you can, or manually if you can, and take your time. Split up the job into manageable chunks. Don't try and do it all at the same time. So I hope you found that useful. I'll say goodbye now, and then I'll come back to some questions on the chat. So thank you for watching, and goodbye. And I shall see you over in Zoom. Bye.